First contact is not gentle. Earth, March 4th, 2026.
We just lost the entire array. No, look, everything is bottoming out.
Direct feed from SATCOM 4 is gone.
It began not with fire, but with silence. Every radio telescope on Earth went deaf at 3:07 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. The electromagnetic hum that had wrapped the planet for a century, satellites, cell towers, radar arrays, military transponders, cut out as one, as cleanly as a blade through wire. Emergency lights blinked on in observatories from Chile to China. Operators stared at flatline screens. In the windowless heart of NORAD's Cheyenne Mountain Complex, screens that had never shown nothing suddenly showed exactly that. 11 minutes passed before the duty officer typed the words no protocol had ever truly prepared anyone to send. Unidentified, origin unknown, count indeterminate. The count, when satellites repositioned and cameras turned skyward, was not dozens. It was not hundreds. Thousands of craft hung in low Earth orbit, obsidian black and enormous, shaped like no geometry found in nature. Vast irregular prisms, some the size of stadiums, others the size of cities, arranged in slow-rotating spherical clusters against the dark. They caught no light. They emitted no signal. They simply were, like stones dropped into the sky and forgotten there. The ISS crew pressed their faces against the cupola glass and watched one drift past 4 kilometers away, silent and lightless, and so large it blocked the stars behind it in a long, slow sweep. One astronaut later wrote in her log that it looked less like a machine and more like something that had grown in the darkness between galaxies, patient and purposeful, over incomprehensible time. On the ground, panic moved faster than any official statement could contain it. Times Square at 4 a.m. was shoulder to shoulder. Thousands of faces turned skyward, phones raised, streams running live to hundreds of millions more. In Seoul, crowds flooded Han River Park in the pre-dawn dark. In Mumbai, in Lagos, in Sao Paulo, people poured into streets and stood looking up at a sky that from the ground appeared unchanged, blue and ordinary and utterly inadequate as a backdrop for what was happening above it. Governments scrambled. Emergency sessions convened. The UN Security Council met in a chamber half-lit and breathless, delegates still pulling on jackets, screens behind them cycling between satellite feeds and maps tracking the clusters above. Restraint was the only policy anyone could agree on. If something capable of crossing the stars chose not to immediately destroy anything, perhaps the next move should not be humanity's. That restraint lasted exactly 2 days. On March 6th, they descended. The first craft broke atmosphere over the Pacific without heat bloom, without friction, without the plasma trail that should have lit it up like a comet. It simply came down, shedding altitude in long, unhurried arcs, as if gravity were a suggestion it had chosen to partially accept. It was roughly a mile across. F/A-18S, scrambled from 2 carriers, went dark at 30,000 feet. Instruments dead, pilots reporting a crushing pressure in their skulls, and turned back without engaging. The craft settled at 12,000 feet above open ocean and hovered there, casting a shadow across the water the size of Rhode Island. The shadow was perfectly still. The ocean beneath it churned with unnatural cold. Within 6 hours, 17 more craft descended across the globe. Over the Sahara, one descended low enough that sand beneath it began to fuse into glass from some heat or force that emitted no visible light. Over Siberia, the taiga fell silent, every animal for 200 miles going quiet simultaneously. Over Seoul, a craft the size of 3 city blocks came down so slowly that millions watched it from their windows over the course of an afternoon, its underside a lattice of dark material that shifted and moved like a living thing. In central Kansas, one hung so low above the plains that a family sheltering in their farmhouse felt the vibration in their teeth and watched through a window as their wheat flattened in a perfect circle, as if bowing. Militaries worldwide tracked them all. Gun barrels elevated. Launch codes were reviewed. No one fired. Not yet. The ground assault began on March 12th, and it began without warning. From the belly of 7 craft simultaneously, drop ships descended, each the size of a city block, moving fast, moving low, disgorging not individuals, but formations. Hundreds of figures per craft, and then thousands, pouring from apertures that opened in the ship's undersides like wounds. They were bipedal, tall, 8 feet at minimum, encased in something that was not quite armor and not quite biological, shifting in color and texture as they moved, adaptive, alive. They hit the ground running, not shambling, not cautiously, running in coordinated sweeps, covering distance with a mechanical efficiency that left no room for doubt about what this was. This was not contact, this was occupation. Paris was the first city to burn. A formation of several hundred aliens poured into the 13th arrondissement from a drop zone on the outskirts. And whatever they carried, weapons is an insufficient word for devices that unmade matter at the molecular level, began taking buildings apart from the base up. Entire blocks simply dissolved, folding inward in clouds of gray particulate. The Eiffel Tower survived the first hour because it was steel and apparently beneath their interest. The roads leading out of the city did not survive the second hour, as alien formations cut across highways with methodical precision, herding traffic into gridlocked chaos. Thousands of civilians poured on foot through the Bois de Boulogne, running east, running anywhere, the sky behind them lit orange and gray with fires that burned with a strange, low-frequency pulse. Children carried by adults. The elderly abandoned in cars. The raw, ancient animal fact of human beings running from something larger and more powerful than themselves. Seoul fell under assault within the same hour. Tokyo, Cairo. Chicago's lakefront was lit by a dropship hovering over Lake Michigan while formations advanced through the loop, and the footage captured by a traffic camera on Michigan Avenue, hundreds of figures moving in perfect, terrible unison through the concrete canyon of the city's downtown, glass falling in curtains from towers ahead of them, became the image the world would return to for years. The image of the thing actually happening. The world's militaries stopped waiting. The response was not coordinated. There was no time for coordination. It was simultaneous and furious and deeply, desperately human. Every nation on Earth arriving at the same decision in the same window of minutes, acting on the oldest available instinct: fight back. NATO's first wave went in over Paris. Typhoons and Rafales swept in low and fast from the east, releasing precision munitions on alien formations, advancing through the 15th arrondissement. The first volley hit, buildings cratered, fire bloomed, and alien formations absorbed the blasts, staggered, and in some cases, not all, but some, went down. The pilots pulled hard left and climbed and radioed back the same word in French and English simultaneously. Effect. Effect confirmed. They could be hurt. The shields that had dissolved a tank round in Kansas either failed under sufficient ordnance or were simply not deployed in every context. Whatever the reason, when a GBU-39 small-diameter bomb detonated 6 feet from a cluster of aliens in the Place d'Italie, it did not dissolve. It detonated, and the aliens around it fell. On the Korean peninsula, the ROK Army's 3rd Corps engaged formations advancing from a landing zone south of Incheon with massed artillery. K-9 Thunder howitzers firing as fast as their automated loaders could cycle. The ground shook in a continuous rolling thunder that residents 40 miles north in Seoul could hear through sealed windows. The barrage was not precise. It was overwhelming. It churned a 2-kilometer stretch of highway into a landscape of craters and burning wreckage, and when drones swept the aftermath, alien bodies were visible in the smoke. They were killable, costly, deeply, terribly costly, but killable. In the American Midwest, the response was armor. Columns of M1A, 2SE, PV-3 Abrams tanks rolled out of Fort Riley and Fort Hood simultaneously, converging on 3 alien landing zones across Kansas and Oklahoma. Outside Wichita, a line of 12 Abrams crested a low ridge overlooking a broad alien formation, advancing across open farmland and opened fire at 800 meters. The first rounds were absorbed, a shimmer in the air, harmless bursts of gray, but the crews kept firing, cycling through ammunition at maximum rate, and somewhere in the sustained barrage the shields gave. An Abrams gunner tracking a tall alien figure through thermals watched it take a direct hit from a 120-millimeter round and come apart completely. A spray of light and heat and debris scattered across the field. The crew whooped on the intercom. Outside, the formation kept advancing. But now they were advancing into something that could stop them. Above, the U.S. Air Force ran coordinated strikes with B-21 Raiders launching from altitude, precision-guided munitions walking across alien landing zones in rapid sequences. In one strike package over Oklahoma City, a formation of several hundred aliens was caught in the open during a gap between their dropships' rearming cycles. A B-21 delivered 6 GBU-28 bunker busters in a tight pattern. The detonations were visible from 50 miles away, a sudden orange flower opening on the plains, a column of black smoke rising in still air. When satellite imagery cleared, the formation was gone. But the ships above were responding now. From their undersides, beams, coherent, focused, the color of something between purple and white, began reaching down into cities. Not indiscriminate, targeted, military installations, radar arrays, runways. A joint base in Germany took 3 strikes in 90 seconds. Hangars and aircraft dissolved in expanding spheres of superheated air. A naval base in Yokosuka simply ceased to exist in the space between one satellite pass and the next. At sea, a carrier strike group operating in the Arabian Sea fired a full salvo of Tomahawk cruise missiles at a descending dropship, and 1 in 6 got through. The others deflected, redirected, or simply stopped in mid-flight. But the one that connected sent the dropship spiraling into the ocean in a cascade of alien fire and debris that lit the night sky across 300 miles. 1 dropship. 1. Against a full carrier strike group's salvo. The math was terrible. Everyone running the numbers already knew it. By March 15th, the ground war had become the most costly 11 days in human military history. Every major combatant nation had taken catastrophic losses, but the aliens had taken losses too. Cumulative, undeniable, documented in satellite imagery and drone footage, and the exhausted field reports of soldiers who had survived long enough to write them. Alien formations that had moved with frightening confidence on day 1 were moving with more caution by day 8, adapting to human tactics the way a thinking adversary adapts, with frustration and adjustment and occasional error. Russia's deployment of thermobaric weapons against alien formations in Siberia proved gruesomely effective. Israel's Iron Dome architecture, retrofitted and networked with Allied systems in 48 hours of frantic engineering, began achieving intercept rates against alien-directed energy attacks that no one had thought possible a week earlier. India's Air Force developed a tactic, flying in dense, uncoordinated patterns that confounded whatever targeting system the aliens used, that cut losses on close air support runs by 30%. China's DF-41 ballistic missiles, launched in saturation salvos against orbital craft, got 3 confirmed hits before the orbital fleet began repositioning to avoid the trajectory windows. Humanity was losing, but humanity was learning. Civilians ran. They had been running since day one, on highways choked 10 lanes wide, on foot through fields, by boat across every body of water adjacent to a landing zone. The refugee columns were vast enough to be seen from orbit. In the darkness of the first nights, the columns moved by the light of fires behind them, long human rivers flowing away from the noise and the heat, and the impossible thing that had come down from the sky. Children asleep on their feet, the elderly in wheelchairs pushed by strangers. Every border in the world dissolved by sheer weight of movement, every checkpoint abandoned, every old political line rendered meaningless by something that recognized none of them. But the columns kept moving. That was the thing. That was the irreducible, infuriating, magnificent thing about it. The columns kept moving. And at the front of every column, somewhere, there was someone who had turned around to make sure the person behind them was still following. Somewhere above, in the vastness of low Earth orbit, thousands of obsidian craft turned slowly in the dark, patient, watching. Whatever calculation they were running, whatever threshold they were waiting for humanity to cross, had not yet resolved into a final answer. The planet below them burned in 40 places, and kept fighting in all of them.